Welcome to the Jarol SVU channel. Today we will discuss, in my opinion, the most overlooked and underrated deck in the game, which if found can shake the current meta or simply crush it. Link to the deck in the comment below the video. This material was supposed to be created before Richmond, but I was sick. That's why the sideboard should probably be a bit different, but apart from that, maybe it's better that it happened, for the simple reason. This wedge should be a bit better in the current meta than I thought. Kira looks like the only potential very problematic matchup when everything else is going very well, but more on that later. Wedge Yellow is an aggro swarm and space deck. You simply have to play many ships and supply them with pilots cheaply, which is very easy thanks to the deck's construction. You deal a lot of damage quickly and Wedge Chewbacca and hammer finishers. Sometimes you can also create giant units thanks to many pilots on one ship. I will talk more about this later. Is this a deck that will simply kill pretty quickly or lose? Yes. Or is this a deck that relies on luck? Definitely not. This deck is very consistent because it has a lot of cheap powerful plays. Only a lot of responses to the opponent can stop you from quickly destroying the opponent, or some extremely aggressive red Kylo, which is probably the only deck that can be faster than you. One sentinel, one removal, even two will most likely be too little to stop you. Theoretically, your weak draws can also do this, but it's very unlikely because this deck has a lot of cheap units and different development options on the table. And now let's go into the details. First, we will go over all the cards in the deck, discussing the strategy in detail, and then we'll move on to matchups and way to prevent this deck from being effectively countered. Why Wedge? The ability to play cheap pilots can be very useful and generally make it easier to quickly build a whiteboard, always with an emphasis on space. On the first turn alone, it gives you great opportunities. You can play a ship for 2 and pilot for 1, which gives you 4-4 or 5-3 unit. You can play a 1 and then make it 4-4 or 4-6. In most matchups there are very good options that leave your opponents behind. If your opponent is playing Power of the Dark Side, it will be optimal to play 2 ones and throw a pilot into one of them. In matchups where the cards doesn't matter much, you can theoretically even play all 4 cards on the first turn. 2 ships, R2 and a pilot for 1, so in almost every game you have a strong opening. In the second round, the best move is often a legendary falcon plus a pilot, thanks to which you will attack with even more tempo. Against decks with the Power of the Dark Side, a great move is also Red Leader and a pilot on him, thanks to which you have an X-Wing to sacrifice and more presence on the table. Other moves should be also okay. Wedge when he comes out is also decent. If the opponent has resources or can play Bamboozle, we prefer going to the ground to definitely deal usually 1 or 2 times free damage. However, if there is a large sentinel on the ground, it is probably better to try in space. In many specific situations, going out with Wedge as a pilot can win games, creating large units that will be either be impossible for the opponent to kill or will give you tempo because they have a lot of attack. They can also be a great target for surprise strike. Have Wedge and Chewbacca on same ship, this ship becomes simply unkillable. We play yellow because this color has a lot of dangerous ship and tools to play quickly and to use the Wedge ability and its ability to go to ship. In my opinion, you need to play aggro. Instead of Petranaki Arena, we play 30 to confidently defeat all other aggro decks. However, if the meta were to be mainly control, we can switch to Petranaki to have a slightly better chance to kill control in time. Once. First of all, we play a full package of ships for 1, 3 copies of Cartel Turncoat and Wolfpack Escort. Cartel has great statistics and his bounty is not very important from the perspective of our very fast strategy. Wolfpack is useful because it is another ship, so it strengthens our effort in space and we can attach a pilot to it. In addition, its ability when played can be useful when one of our units on the ground gets some bounty or entrench against Bosk or hard control. R2 makes opening with 2 ones probable and on the ground as 1-4 it is okay. It is even better to play it as a pilot. First of all, it is free. Secondly, you can attach another pilot there later. Thirdly, it can even allow us to play 4 cards in the first turn. This can be useful in some aggro mirrors. Yen Nump is here primarily for its piloting, just like Dodge Squadron Pilot. On the ground, in case of anything, they are also okay if there is no other way. In addition, Nump's ability promotes playing many pilots and also twos. Alliance X-Wing, A-Wing are simply decent plays for 2, for which you can often attach a pilot. Resistance X-Wing is more situational, but I thought we need more tools, and if we happen to find him a pilot, he becomes dangerous. His big advantage is also that he is a hero, so he has synergy with Forkos, I believe in. Anakin is one of our best pilots in this deck, and an okay play on the ground. His ability to return to hand can sometimes allow for even an additional 6 damage when we have a lot of ships and a lot of free resources. Both can happen often. A lot of ships, especially in aggro mirrors, a lot of free resources, especially when you run out of cards or draw only cheap things. We stop resourcing in most cases at 5, but if we have play from the top deck, we will often draw 2 ones or 1 and 2. Surprise Strike Finisher, great acceleration in aggro mirrors or help in removing sentinels, bamboozle in as many as 3 pieces. Firstly, Kazuda comes out faster, so it has the potential to trade the race, as well as against other pilots, leaders and extremely powerful cards. Secondly, a powerful card against sentinels with pilots. Thirdly, against all potential decks for upgrades and often not stupid against traitorous. It's not removing the upgrade, but removing the traitorous can complicate things for the opponent and not get a hard hit from some stolen ships, which can potentially be a very big by pilots, and then they will return to your hand. Freeze. Both Falcons in 3 copies are obvious. Legendary gives obvious tempo. Paying 1 resource every turn in this deck usually doesn't hurt too much. This one from the first set has great potential in this deck and good stats. +1 for each pilot when this ship by itself can have 2 pilots, and if you find R2 even 3, makes getting 10 attack on this ship can be realistic. In addition, if you have Wedge, you get a leader unit that can't be killed by 2 removals except Rival's Fall, not still by Traitorous. If in addition you have Chewbacca, the opponent just lose the game unless you are already far in the late game or on 10 or 11 resources. 2 copies of Death Space Skirmisher and 1 Blue Leader. Death Space Skirmisher is great in this deck, he can literally win the games. You almost always have another unit in space, so you almost always stop something. One of the worst matchups for the decks are blue-white-red decks, but they often rely on their leader, Anakin or Rey. When you tap them, you gain valuable time to crush the opponent with your white space. Against decks playing Cunning, the threat of +4 for some unit is much lower when you have 2 of these ships and 3 bamboozle. His only flaw in this deck is that he is not heroic, so to strengthen our 4 cows we play Blue Leader. This card is simply solid. 3-3 in space is okay, especially since we play many pilots. Ambush can be useful to shot some ship with 2 attacks in space, preferably Restore Arc, or on the ground some unit with 5 HP, preferably something with Restore or Sentinel. As I mentioned, this deck may sometimes not have anything to spend resources on when it reaches 5 or will play from the top. 5-5 on the ground with ambush or sometimes 3 plus another card is usually just well spent resources. It may happen that Piet knocks the cost the space with the Devastator, and then every unit that you can play on the ground can be decisive for the result of the game. 4-4. We only have 1 unit here, which in addition usually costs cheaper. This is one of the auto-includes in every deck on Wedge because it promotes playing pilots. Token 2-2 is always a decent unit, often important in playing around Powered of the Dark Side. If you manage to play Red Leader in the second turn, and it is the same turn you play a pilot on him, which is absolutely possible, every deck will have a problem controlling your table, and your chances of a quick victory increase greatly. It is very beneficial to play R2 on him and then another pilot, in total 2 X-Wings of profit. Next to the Falcon from the first set, this is the best ship for Wedge to go out with. Even if this move is countered, you always have some profit from it. Although, of course, it does not mean that you should always play like this. At this stage of the game, it may even happen that you will be able to play such a unit for 1 or 2 resources, which is an extremely favorable price for 3-4 unit in space that also gives benefits for attaching pilots to it. Plays for 5. 4 cows in this deck costs as much as 5 resources, but can be very important. The reason for this is that if this deck loses presence on the table, it has very few options to finish an opponent. Basically, all that is left is to count on the legendary Falcon, or that the opponent will have no answer to standard moves, Sneak attack in this deck does not have a good target, but is after all counterable. For these reasons, I decided that up to 4 damage to the base can be decisive, and it was confirmed. There are many decks that only play 25 HP, where this card would be useful even in 3 copies. The ability to arrange cards can also be very important, especially if you, after sideboard, have 3 copies of this card. We also have Chewbacca and Han here, both rather preferable as pilots, but the option to play them on ground can be very strong. Chewbacca is better due to the wide possibilities of creating partly or completely unkillable units, which is one of our few chances against card control, below to blue and yellow decks. +3/+3 is a lot for a pilot who cost only 2 with a wedge. On the ground he also has ability and 5/6, so also solid statistics. Han as a pilot is strong, only for 1 with a wedge you get +2/+3 and attack immediately. Moreover, if you play him on one of our 6 falcons, you may not receive damage from the opponent, which can be also very useful. On ground, 4/5 or 4/5 is okay, and ambush can kill a lot of units with restore or sentinels. Sideboard. Third for a cause against decks at 25 or when we lack finishers. 3 times outmaneuver against blue hero decks or Kylo Red. The rest are attempts to improve matchups for soft control and heavy control. 3 Kira, Confiscate, Wolfie. Is this the final sideboard? No, but I think it's pretty close. Other options for the deck. Falcon is an interesting finisher, especially Smuggle can be useful here. However, it does not fit the concept of 6 resource deck. If you have not won yet, you prefer to field, for example, 2 Falcons and finish off the opponent. There might be a place for it on the sideboard, but this is not very good for control because it can die from many removals, and the sideboard is mainly to try to improve the matchup against control. Guild TIE Fighter is an okay unit with an additional option to draw cards. First of all, I simply lack a place for it. We already have 6 ships for 1. Sabine's Masterpiece is good, but Blue Leader wins the competition thanks to the chance playing it for 5 on the ground and the chance to use resources better in the later stage of the game. Liberator Gunship can help to gain a great advantage in the space, but for now I don't see the need for these cards. Rebel package is decent, but we don't have many rebels in this deck. Attack with +2 is okay, but we are quite fast. We can almost always afford to play a pilot and attack only later. Apart from that, from acceleration we already have Surprise Strike and Han unit. Wing Leader can be very strong, but even more often it will probably be disappointing due to the lack of units to buff. But I haven't tested this card too much in this deck, so maybe in practice there is still some hidden advantage here. Moving on to the matchups, let's start with the easiest. As you can see, there are a lot of decks here. Most decks are not ready for such an overwhelming and fast attack in space. Many play base at 25 HP, and decks with bases above 30 cannot be in this category. Sabine, even if she played Upgrade Hate, Free Bright Hope and Traitors in main, would probably lose only 1-2, and since all Sabine players currently play at most one of these things, I usually win this matchup 2-0. Han, regardless of color, has no option to stop such a large swarm, and in addition in space. Quinlan Cat is a syndrome of 25 and ineffective pings on so on many units. Kira, like a very blue villain deck, has a wide potential to counter our deck, but with 25 it usually loses 1-2. Palpatine yellow, Palpatine without a base above 30 has no chance against us. Pieta Sign here has a similar problem. Unless it's blue, then even at 30 he should be a medium or big problem. Gary is too slow for our deck. He doesn't play good control cards because I want to be aggro myself. Boba doesn't have enough racing or control potential. Even matchups. Palpatine with a large base requires a smooth end to the game, otherwise when he comes out and throws a finisher for 8 it can be very difficult. And here's the ending. It is not easy for us because Wedge is not Sabine. Anakin Colossus Blue Hero in addition with such a base should be a big problem, but it's easy to slow down with tapping. Besides, he has less cards at the start, so it will be harder for him to find good answers. In addition, he practically never plays, for example, Vigilance and generally quite little Restore if he doesn't draw, for example, Yoda and Cannon at once. Rey, on the other hand, has a potentially very large Restore, but thanks to 25 HP you have a good chance of winning. before it comes out, or later delay it with tapping and still stuff the damage with some surprise strike. Sabine Yellow has a lot of finishers, a lot of swarm possibilities. Of course it comes out faster, so the race with her may not be easy, but generally you should win in the wedge turn. Bosk Data Vault is he draws a lot of ramp removal and ends with a walker. There is not much we can do, but it does not happen that often, so the average game in this matchup is quite even. Piet at 35 has a good chance, but still if he does not play Devastator or Pershing very quickly in the first turn, he will have few cards, little strength on the ground, so throwing there for example Chewbacca and coming out with Wedge in the same turn can be very effective. Luke Orlando at 30 are dangerous because of shields and restore, but finishing them off in that time is quite likely. Card control, yellow, black, blue. If doesn't play tons of healing in main, you have a chance to kill this in tempo and squeeze her out on the sideboard. Against Kylo Red we have a close matchup. He swarms, we swarms, he comes out early, but we usually have a 5 HP advantage and tapping, especially outmaneuver, can win after side. Bosk Blue is awful, healing after 10-12 from the base is extremely unfriendly for this deck. Maybe you will fight more after the side, but the chances are slim. Kira on 30 on 33 on the sideboard with a lot of healing and HP is very hard to beat. Luke on Data Vault has a lot of time to stop you, and Hero mono blue deck, especially on 35, is a touch thing. You can try to trade a bit stream, but if Luke and Redemption finally go down, our chances are not great. Statistics with the deck in TTI in the 2 seasons so far, once 5-2, once 4-2. On Caravast, this is before the ban, practically everything won except for a very bad matchup against Django. After the ban, also good statistics against many problematic decks. And here is update my leash after 10 rounds. There are still 3 rounds left, but certain conclusions are already emerging. Kira is simply the best deck in set 4, even Django is not as effective in destroying various decks, but overall soft control decks are doing well in this season. Yoda and Vader in the lead bases above 30 are good for them. Aggro in a bad situation, Wedge and Sabine, especially green with many problems. Boba green with 7-3 in 5 plays is also solid. See you in next video, bye.